Hello, Rick Sarnes here, aka Willis the Poet. It's National Poetry Day, isn't it? National Poetry Day. I'll just do a poem. What I wrote for National Poetry Day was like this. It's called National Poetry Day. Thank you. Today is our day, poets. The day when poems go national. The grand national of poetry, as it were. Jumping the fences, racing over the ground, jostling for position on the big stage, anxious to clear the hurdles, hoping that we don't fall and break a leg, praying we won't be put down behind the stable block. It's not only National Poetry Day, but coincidentally, on this day, or there more or less around this day, in 1975, we saw the launch of the film Jaws. It's a famous film, and people like Jaws, don't they? I particularly like the one-liners. I like the line, you're going to need a bigger boat. That's a famous one, isn't it? But for me, that's a little bit unspecific. If I was Captain Quint, I'd be looking for something a little bit more, well, you know, accurate about how much more of a bigger boat am I going to need. I'll be a little bit longer, like a schooner, something like that. Or maybe a little bit wider, so you can do the old, a bit more stable on the, like a tugboat, something like that. See, for me, it would be better if it was like, if he was chumming over the side, chumming like that. Oh, that's a job, isn't it? Chumming. And the shark comes along, like that. Well, it doesn't go like, it's not a lion, is it? It's not a lion. When the shark comes along, it's just not the same without any noise. The shark comes along, like that, and he goes, you're going to need a Japanese whaling boat. Now, you see, that's a bit more, that's the sort of specificity that I'd be looking for if I was Captain Quint. Anyway, this is a short poem, what I wrote for Poetry Day, National Poetry Day. Spanish Inquisition. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, except perhaps the Spanish. Thank you. Space, that's overrated, isn't it? Space. Here's a poem I wrote for National Poetry Day. It's called Space is Overrated. It's 55 million miles to Mars, and I don't really like long haul flights at the best of times. I mean, 3 hours in a car is about my limit before I'm bored off my tits. And I think they're going to run out of beer off the drinks trolley. And imagine having to stomach 185 days of Keira Knightley on loop, repeat, as Pirates of the Caribbean is the only film that they have for the in-flight entertainment. Nah, space, it's overrated. And even if you've got enough money to escape this planet, as you leave the atmosphere, you'll find there is no atmosphere. It's just cold and dark, black and dark, black, as far as the eye can see. And if you've got seasonal affective disorder, it's just a lifetime of Icelandic winters and depression. Space, nah, it's overrated. I blame Professor Brian Cox for making space all sexy by being just the right side of 40 and from Manchester with his loafers and his Fred Perry t-shirt. He's telling everyone that space isn't rocket science, but flipping is rocket science! And difficult to understand for people like me who are easily confused by Brexit and mobile phone apps. Space, it's overrated. They say space is the final frontier, but that's wrong because we're already there. If you're outside, stood on the ground, then the bit all around you, that's space. You don't have to go to the moon to experience the excitement of space travel. Just get on a bike and pedal to the nearest highest point. Take in the view, then turn and freewheel down. And if you go fast enough, you'll even get the thrill of weightlessness. Space. It's overrated. You're going to need an Icelandic trawler. You see? That's the sort of specific details I'd be looking for, size-wise. Anyway. It's a little something that I wrote for National Poetry Day. It says, I wrote this off a prompt, and the prompt was, I think the poems went down well. That's the prompt for National Poetry. It's like a poetry workshop, this session. Here we go. This is called Something Different. There are times in your life when you think to yourself, I want to try something new, something different, something daring. instead of sitting here staring at the same old tired scene, feeling like you've been in this rut for as long as you can remember. Now, it may appear to you to be a massive quantum leap to go from sedentary pedantry to naked poetry performance, but that was the path I chose to carve out a niche for myself on the performance poetry scene. I started small, an open mic here, an open mic there, bearing all for art's sake, and it didn't take long before I started to make an impact, get a following, middle-aged women mostly, but that's okay, because they always had a complimentary thing to say about my sonnets and my stanzas, my performance technique. I would often be asked to pose for a selfie. Nobody seemed to comment on my nudity, as if the whole ensemble was as natural as when every other poet stood upon the stage. And very soon I was all the rage. Interviews, headline slots, showing what I got to anyone prepared to put their hand in their pocket, turn up to see what naked poetry was all about. The praise kept coming. Local radio wanted in on the act, insisting I performed sans clothes, even though none of the listeners could see me. And the Guardian did a piece about the rise of the phenomenon, how naked poetry was the new rock and roll, how I was driving the agenda for male empowerment, a modern day gender feminist. I didn't understand a word of it. I just liked getting naked and spouting forth, not bothered about what anyone would say, or even whether they were interested, or why I chose to do it all without wearing any clothes. And then one day the bubble burst. I remember it quite distinctly. I got the gig that every performance poet craves, a headline slot at Glastonbury Festival, with all the raves and bands, the massive crowds, the chance to entertain the masses, represent the poetry working classes, and I couldn't wait. It started well, a groundswell of appraisal from some ladies in the front of the tent, content it seemed to stand and take it all in. The words were flowing, I was glowing, loving every minute. And then it happened. A little girl, dressed as a unicorn, complete with horn and glittery twinkle, shouted out at the top of her voice across the tent that she could see my tinkle. And then her brother joined in, and pretty soon the audience had turned, started to shout abuse to beer and Jew, to boo and jeer, to jeer and boo, to boo and jeer. That sounds better, doesn't it? To boo and jeer, and then a plastic glass was thrown, and I don't think that it was full of beer, so I legged it off the stage. As other objects rained down on my head, the mob was baying for my blood. I knew then that my naked poetry adventure was at an end for good. Standing stark as and forlorn, as vulnerable as a newborn, I suppressed the urge to scream and yell. Turning instead to the poetry tent promoter, I just said, never mind. I think the poems went down well. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, excellent. That's enough of that rubbish. Here's a poem. It's called Spanish Flu. Nobody expects the Spanish flu, except perhaps the Spanish. What's that? Got to do a love poem now. Oh, this is an ode. Write this one for National Poetry Day. Ode to the pylon. I love you, pylon. You reach into the skylon, magnificently high lon. You hardly have to try long. Your eclectic, geometric, definitively electric, your high wire trapeze, the tempting towering tease. I want to climb you, even though the health and safety rules define you as life-threatening. I'm betting that the view from you is awe-inspiring. I love you, pylon, as I spy you from afar on through the window of my car lawn. Stretched out across the landscape, inviting escape. I'm urged to follow on until we reach the substation where we make the final connection. Sparks will fly on. You will be forever my lawn. Pylon. Cheers. I think you're going to need a cross-channel ferry. Yes, you see, that's the sort of thing that will tell you how big a boat you need. Cross-channel ferry. This one's called Spanish Fly. Nobody expects a Spanish fly except perhaps you, the bloody Spanish, obviously. Right, it's autumn now, isn't it? Autumn. Nights are drawing in. Here's a poem that I wrote for National Poetry Day. It's called Autumn on West Midlands Railways. I like to travel on the train at this time of year, looking through your uncurtained windows as dusk draws near. I see all sorts: man in his boxer shorts with a cup of tea, woman at the sink washing what looks like a parrot. It's hard to see. A family sat down at the table playing cards, a couple rowing, smashing crockery to shards. The everyday detritus whistles by, in the blink of an eye they're gone. I often wonder, as the train goes racing past, if anyone is looking back and sees me watching through the carriage glass, asking what I'm up to with my massive telephoto lens. Ho-ho! Now, because it's National Poetry Day, for those that know me now, I'm always pushing the boundaries of poetry. I'm going to finish with this poem. I'm the only poet in the world writing poems for performance on the kazoo. I know that for a fact. So I'm going to finish with a kazoo haiku. That even rhymes, doesn't it? It's brilliant. That's all in tune, thank you. Right, kazoo haiku, here we go. You ready? Excellent. Thank you very much. Have a very happy National Poetry Day. Cheers. Right, there.